let's start the Ramayan day today. So, page number 470 and chapter number is 36. An infernal Shakti. Ravan went to war like a fire sweeping the earth. Around him were Mahodra, Mahaparshva, and Virupaksha. In waves around their chariots swelled the Rakshas army, a million demons. Like the god of death came Ravan. But as soon as he emerged from his palace, darkness filled the sky. It seemed the sun had been plucked out of the day. The earth shuddered as if with a tremor of fear and ill omen. Strange birds had gathered in the trees, birds of night at midday. They gave rasping throat to some great evil, an imminent calamity they saw plainly with vision that pierced the veil of time. Eerie clouds scudded across the face of the sun and rained down glutinous drops on the lord of Lanka and his army, a drizzle of blood. An eagle of a species never seen on the island flashed down like an astra and perched on Ravan's black banner, obscuring the golden Veena. He flew there. Jackals howled in dismal chorus as if this were not day, but the deepest night. Ravan's left eye and that arm throbbed. They twitched in febrile spasms. But if Ravan read these omens, and he was a knowing master of their lore, he did not acknowledge them, or he was past caring. He rode on, roaring revenge in the names of all his slain. Truly, as death incarnate came Ravan among the Vanars, and none of their paltry rocks and trees was of any avail against his fury. The demon's asters were twice as fierce as anything they had yet seen. They blazed from his bow, they blinded the monkeys and consumed them, so not even ashes were left of the dead. Like an evil star loosed upon the earth, Ravan came hunting the Vanars, and they could not stand before him. They fled as beasts of a jungle do when the jungle burns. But flying high into the air, Sugriv leaped cunningly into the battle behind Ravan. He flew out of the sky at Virupaksha, and that Rakshas was taken unawares. With one blow of his open palm, a blow like fate, Sugriv broke Virupaksha's neck. So his head lolled loose, and he fell out of his chariot. Ravan shouted to Mahodra to take Virupaksha's place near him. His back was unprotected. Though at first the monkeys fled from the Rakshas, they soon collected themselves. Nimbly skirting his chariot, they went behind Ravan's back to fight the army of Lanka. But Mahodra, who was also a master of astras, attacked the monkeys who dodged his king. He attacked them with airy fireballs that flew out of his hands and with the jagged streaks of lightning. He burned 1,000 Vanars in moments, but then Sugriv, king of the jungle, saw him. He leaped at Mahodra, snatched the sword from his hand, and using a blade for the first time in his life, struck off the Rakshasa's head with his own weapon. Its scream cut off. Mahodra's head flew from its trunk and fell among his terrified horses. They bolted from the field, bearing their master's body away in his crimson chariot. Sugriv's jungle roar echoed above all the other roars and screams of battle and brought a smile to Ram's lips. Then Mahaparshu was at the Vanars, his chariot everywhere, dealing death as if the monkeys' lives counted for less than nothing. Angad came through his legions, parting them like a sea to face the Rakshas. Long the two fought, with arrows against rocks and trees, and both of them streamed blood from all their limbs. Finally, with an impatient cry, Angad grew tall as a tree himself and struck Mahaparsh a blow on his chest that broke his ribs. One rib pierced his heart and he died, his eyes rolling up white on his bloody face. The Vanars cheered deafeningly. They yelled their king's name and their prince's, and the battleground echoed with their cries of joy. Ravan screeched at his Sarthi, "Fly at Ram! He must die today, even if the war is lost." like a nightmare that haunts waking, realer than daylight. The memory of how Ram humiliated him rose in Ravan's fragmenting mind. He screamed at the memory as if to erase it from time. To rid himself of its burning shame, he invoked an astra called tamas. It had been given him by Brahma, and he loosed it at the Vanars. A shaft of black flames. It came among them like a forest fire among the dry trees of summer, and their piteous screams rang across the field. The smell of charred monkey flesh filled the air. At last, Ram stood forth against Ravan. Blue and serene, the Prince of Light faced the King of Darkness. Ram of Ayodhya stood forth, bright and fearsome on that fateful day. The Kodand was on his hand, a faint smile was on his lips. Lakshman was at his side, and they were like Mahavishnu with his brother Indra beside him. For a moment their gazes locked, Ram's fine, clear eyes and the Rakshas's sallow ones. A chasmal hush fell on Lanka, like twin moments of time being born from Brahma. The human and the demon raised their bows at once, and the duel began. When Ram and Ravan fought, even Lakshman became just an onlooker. The bowstrings resounded across the field like cracks of doom. The sky was lit up by 100 comets, which met in pairs, unerringly, and exploded. Those shafts that were not intercepted flashed down, blazing at the enemy. But both warriors were great tapaswins. Not even the devas could burn them. With light or fire, darkness or sorcery, Ram shot a Rudrastra at Ravan, but the flaming thing was extinguished against the Rakshas's kavach, his silver mail. Ravan had a macabre Asur Astra for Ram, one the prince had never seen before. It flared at him, then turned into a savage prides of lions and tigers. They came bounding at him out of the sky in a bloodthirsty hunt. Ram remembered how frightened the beasts of the jungle are of fire. He loosed an Agni Astra at them, and those creatures of Maya were consumed. On they fought, untiringly, on the threshold of death, where this world and the next seem like one realm, where darkness and night, time and timelessness are the same. They fought with orbs of flames and night, each a little sun, each a void. Some were calorific, some freezing, some were arrows straight as time, some were little globes, worlds in miniature, enchanted and uncanny. Both their armies stood awestruck when Ravan and Ram duelled. Some missiles brought dreams or visions in the sky, meant to lull the enemy. Others brought soft songs, but quietly maddening, so one could lose one's mind hearing them. But for every astra, there was another that made it harmless, no more than a spectacle in the sky. They fought on as if they made unknown music together, those mortal enemies. They fought as if they were both made of the same cosmic breath, two halves of a single genius. But suddenly, another archer, impatient to be part of that battle, stormed into the fray. Lakshman was not willing to be left out. He must join in what seemed almost like a celebration, a festival of arms, though of course it was a duel to the death. Lakshman cut down the banner of Ravan's chariot with the two light like arrows. Spitting flames, the demon turned on Ram's brother, but Lakshman split the Rakshas's bow in his hands and shot his Sarthi dead with an arrow through his temple. Now Vibhishan was among them, roaring. He sprang at his brother's unworldly steeds and killed them. When he saw Vibhishan, Ravan's rage blazed up. The lord of Lanka leaped lithely down from his shattered chariot. In his arms there shone a bizarre Shakti. Ravan spread his arms wide, wide, and the Shakti yawned in the space between his hands, an emerald darkness. It spun humming there, a thing of perfect evil, crying a ringing devil's cry in an old and harsh tongue that only Vibhishan knew. Ravan cast that weapon at his brother. But in a wink, two arrows of light flashed from Lakshman's bow, and the Shakti was blasted into dust. Ravan roared more horribly, a beast corner. Another Shakti blazed in his arms, and it was brighter than the other. Abruptly, it vanished, and his hands seemed empty. Yet Ravan whirled them around and round, for the weapon was still there. It was a Shakti of Maya that Ravan now spun, a feminine Ayudh of untold power. He glowered at Vibhishan again with fulminant hatred. But the moment Ravan cast the Shakti at his brother, Lakshman leaped between Vibhishan and the invisible weapon. Ram cried out a warning, but the infernal thing flashed into Lakshman's chest, and he fell as if he had been struck by a thunderbolt, blood spouting from him. Roaring exultantly, Ravan seized another bow from the remains of his chariot and strung it to finish Lakshman. Ram gave a strangled cry, as if he had been felled, not his brother. He sprang between the Rakshas and Lakshman, who lay pinned to the earth by the Shakti. Ram's eyes glittered, so even the Vanars slunk away from him. His body was livid, and his arrows were molten. In a voice the monkeys had never heard before, the plumeless voice of an angry god, Ram said, "Not both of us shall remain alive, evil one. If it was to kill you that I was banished when I was still a boy, to kill you I wandered the jungle for 13 years. It was for your death that you took my Sita from me. All my life has been a preparation to rid the earth of you. Die now, Rakshas. There is not room enough in the world for both of us." Ram's golden arrows were made from flames of the apocalypse. They flared in tide at the demon of Lanka. Ravan was tired. He had no answer to Ram's archery. It was a profound thing of the prince's sacred heart. The Rakshas climbed into one of his warriors' chariots and rode back into his city. The lofty gates rang shut behind him. The triumphant shouts of the Vanars echoed through the battlefield, and the rest of the Rakshasas fled. With a sob, Ram sank to his knees beside the fallen Lakshman. The color had ebbed out of the younger prince's face. The Shakti still writhed in his chest, a fire serpent swallowing its tail, and his blood gushed thickly from the wound. Carefully, because it was a thing of dire evil, Ram reached for the Shakti. The moment he touched it, it burst apart in his hands and vanished. Lakshman groaned, but he did not open his eyes, and the blood still poured from the wound that yawned right through his body. Ram took his brother onto his lap. A score of Ravan's arrows stuck in Ram's own arms and chest, but he seemed unaware of them or their pain. In a moment, Sushen, the Vanar physician, was at Ram's side. Frowning, Sushen explored Lakshman's wound with the knowing fingers. Ram whispered to him, "Sushen, I have no will left to fight. If Ravan had not fled just now, he would have found me easy prey. My heart is weak, my body seems not to belong to me anymore. The bow is heavy in my hands, and I can hardly lift it to fight on. Noble Vanar, Lakshman is dead, and I mean to take my own life." Sushen signaled to some monkeys. They ran forward to help carry Lakshman to a safer place, farther from the field where 100,000 lay dead, their blood congealing upon the earth. Ram sat sighing helplessly beside his unconscious brother. He sobbed Lakshman's name, crying where would he find another brother like him. It seemed Ravan had won his war when his Shakti struck Lakshman down. But Sushen said, "Lakshman is not dead. Here, feel his hands, Ram. There is life in them, buried in a deep slumber. Beside, his is not the face of one who has a short life on earth. Lakshman has the face of a long lived man. He is still alive as surely as you and I are." Sushen looked up. Among the Vanar chieftains thronging around them stood Hanuman. He was calm, ready to be of service. Sushen said to him, only the Vishleyakarni can heal this wound and bring Lakshman back to us. Hurry, Hanuman, bring the Oshadi or bring the mountain again. The son of the wind grew vast once more. He flew up into the sky, across holy ocean and sacred continent. The Vanar flew like Ram's arrow. Like a Viman he sailed, and landed for the second time upon the little mountain, also called Sanjeevani. It was daylight now, and he could see the plants of healing, some shaped like tiny men, others like little stars. He breathed their scents and felt his own body begin to glow with new strength and hope like magic in his blood. But by daylight, Hanuman could not be sure which of the glowing plants was the Vishlyakarni. Once more, bracing himself and growing big as half the sky, Hanuman plucked up the mountain by its roots and flew through the air with it. Some say the Sanjeevani mountain allowed him to pick it up so easily because in its primeval heart it remembered the younger days of the earth, when all mountains had wings and flew through the air, the days before Indra severed their wings with his vajra of 1,000 joints. Hanuman flew back to Lanka with the mountain in his hands. Lanka rocked when he set the Sanjeevani down her shores. Sushen ran up those cold slopes with Hanuman, and his knowing eye soon picked out the Vishlakarni. Sushen crushed the man shaped herbs between his fingers and held them under Lakshman's nose, where breath still came and went faintly. The monkeys saw the yawning wound in Lakshman's chest close like a flower at dusk. They saw its every trace vanish from his skin. Lakshman stirred. His eyes flew open. He jumped to his feet and reached for his bow as if he were still in the thick of a battle. With a cry, Ram hugged his brother. I thought you were gone. What would I have done? Not a kingdom or victory, not even having Sita back would have meant anything to me. I would have killed myself if you had died. Lakshman frowned to hear him. He said, you should not yield to grief like an ordinary man. Your mission in this world is not an ordinary man's. As long as his brother lived, Ram was prepared to listen to anything from him. He hugged Lakshman again, laughing in great joy, humoring him as one does a sweet and solemn child. But Lakshman said gravely, listen, Ram, in my swoon, I saw many wonderful dreams and omens. Challenge Ravan today. You must kill him before the day is over. Tomorrow is Amavasya, when the moon's face is hidden by the shadow of the earth. Tomorrow is the day of the Rakshas's greatest strength. Meanwhile, Hanuman lifted the mountain out of the sea again and flew with it to the Himalaya. But before he went, 10,000 monkeys, killed in battle today, rose from the dead and were ready again for the Dharam Yuddha, the war of truth. Their shouts of Ram, Sugriv, Jai, Jai filled the air. A great ocean conch booming, drowned the monkeys shouting. The gates of Lanka flew open, clad in dark blue silk. With a new Sarthi holding his horse's reins, Ravan rode into battle again as if in response to Lakshman's wish. The two great enemies. Ravan shot 10 smoking arrows at Ram. They flew at him, burning up the sky, but Ram plucked them from the air with one shaft of his own and smashed them into dust. In a wink, Ravan was on the other side of Ram, and more arrows flamed at the prince. Now from behind him, whirling round, Ram shot them down, but again Ravan was already somewhere else. The demon rode in Brahma's flashing chariot, yoked to unearthly steeds. Though Ram's bow streamed fire, Ravan was never in one place, so they could find their mark. Quick as wishes, his chariot bore the Lord of Evil over land and through the air. Now he was above, then upon the earth, but across the field, while Ram fought from the ground, where he made an unmoving target. The Devas, the immortal rishis, the Gandharvas and Apsaras, all the celestial ones had gathered in the Akash to watch the fateful battle. Indra cried, "They are almost equal as archers, but the Rakshas has his chariot, while Ram fights on foot." He called Matali his own Sarthi and sent him down to the Blue Prince. In the midst of the stunning duel, a chariot from another world appeared, shimmering before Ram. Jewels shone at its pillars. Its green horses glowed, and their manes seemed to be made of moonlight. The golden thing did not rest on the earth, but hovered 2 hands above the ground, pulsing. Silver moon bells tinkled on its roof. The garlands around the emerald horses' throats were lambent. Mata Ali stepped down from that rath and folded his hands to Ram. The starry Sarthi said, "My lord, Indra has sent you his own chariot, his golden bow, and his arrows that are lightning. He sends you his Shakti. Ram, my horses will obey your thoughts." Ram smiled at Lakshman. This was the same chariot they had watched secretly outside the Shribang's ashram in the Dandakwan. Ram remembered what Agastya had said, that when the time came, Indra would send his own chariot to him. While Lakshman held the storming Rakshas at bay, Ram worshipped the Rath. After folding his hands to it, he climbed in. Like light, Matli flashed away into the sky, with Ram behind him, splendid as Maha Vishnu. Ravan greeted Ram with a cool and deadly Gandharvastra. Ram loosed a Gandharvastra of his own, full of hidden flames. The weapons fused in the sky, but neither could quell the other, and they fell away into the sea far below, where they burned blood red beneath the waves until they were extinguished in the deep. Ram shot a Devastra at the Rakshas, but he had one of his own. These two locked together in a fervid duel of their archers' wills, but the Astra's fires were exhausted before either warrior would submit. Ravan summoned a Rakshas Astra of 1,000 shafts. It spumed into the sky and fell on Ram's chariot. Its every barb a serpent, their hoods were flames, and they spat smoking venom. The sky was full of shining hamadryads flying at blue Ram. But Ram was enthralled with the duel in the air. He admired his enemy's prowess, which for once matched his own. He relished being finally tested to the limits. The Kshatriya strung his bow with a Garudastra. Suddenly, 1,000 birds of prey were in the firmament. The monkeys and demons on the ground below cried out in wonder, and the golden eagles hunted the green serpents with crystal claw and beak. Ravan turned back to common arrows, whistling and sharp. They flew at Ram and Matali, and not even with the unearthly horses' fleetness, nor Indra's Sarthi's dazzling skill could all the shafts be dodged. Many found their mark painfully, and one cut the banner from the Deva's chariot. When Ravan's arrows pierced Ram, it is told the sea swelled in tidal waves, as if it to reach up into the sky to tend his wounds. They say the sun grew dim, as if he had a fever. Mangal reached out to stroke Vishaka, the star of the Ikshvakus, over which Indra and Agni rule. Ravan was as magnificent as Himvan's son Menak. The Rakshas pressed Ram hard, and for a moment it seemed the prince could find no answer to him. Gentle Ram had not imagined Ravan would be quite such an adversary. He glared at the Rakshas across the sky as if to burn him up with his gaze. The earth quailed at Ram's anger. Tigers and leopards skulked into their caves. The birds of the air wheeled in frenzy, screaming, because the very sky shrank from the rage in Ram's eyes. For a moment, even Ravana shivered. Roaring to drown his doubts, 9 heads seething Around the central one, the demons seized up a pale trishul. Triune fires glowed at its points when the Rakshas's hand touched it. The quarters echoed with Ravan's roar. At the bolt of power that surged through his body, the Trishul was a great and olden Ayuddha. No one had ever withstood it. Whirling the thing of white flames in his hands, Ravan cried, "Here comes your death, human. All the Rakshasas you killed are waiting for you in the next world." With a howl, he cast his trident at Ram. Like the Agni from Shiva's eye, it flew, a gash of fire through the sky. The report of its flight was of 100 thunderclaps. It seemed the stuff of time would be torn asunder by that weapon. How could even the Avatar withstand its awesome power? Spewing invisible flames, the Trishul came for Ram's life. The Devas and Rishis shut their eyes. They could not believe any man of flesh and blood could stand before that weapon, which not only burned the body but consumed the soul. Time stood still in the sky between the two chariots, and the fate of the worlds hung in the balance. Slowly taking a lifetime, Ravan's Trishul flew at Ram. In that frozen moment, Ram strung his bow and shot 100 arrows at the macabre thing, but they were burned to ashes and fell away. The missile came on inexorably. Ram's face twitched in despair, hardly knowing what he did anymore. Reaching blindly into the depths of his will, he found Indra's Shakti in the chariot. Just in time, the last shred of an instant he had left, he cast it at Ravan's trident. The explosion in the air was as if the sun had blown apart. On the ground, the Rakshasas and the Vanars covered their eyes with their hands, or they would have been blinded. Ram and Ravan shut their eyes, but the Shakti of light put out the Trishul of darkness, and both fell away to the earth. The unbearable splendor died out of the sky. Demon and prince fought once more. Ravan was shaken. He lurched briefly in his chariot, and at once Ram found him with the three golden barbs. The Rakshas screamed in rage. He stood like an ashok tree in bloom. Crimson flowers unfurled on him, but no vital organ was struck, and his wounds were not deep or inflicted with any astra. Ravan plucked out the shafts and fought on, but the duel drained him. Now his face and his hands were those of an ancient beast, thousands of years old. His skin was like dry parchment. The chariots dazzled with their speed. They were like the magic wind. They flew on earth and through the air, then unearthly horses in blinding contention, spurred by just their charioteers' thoughts. Often both stopped at once, as if by tacit agreement that their warriors needed to rest. After a panting pause, one archer would loose his stream of arrows again, and the other would reply. Into one of those intervals, Ram cried, "I have heard you were a great Tapaswin once. Today you are just a thief, and like a thief, you will die." Ram's aim was as true as when the battle began, but Ravan fumbled at his bow. His arms were sluggish, and his aim was wayward. He dared not acknowledge it, but he was tired. Each moment, Ram covered the Rakshas with 100 arrows from his superb bow. Then Ravan fainted. Instantly, his Sarthi vanished out of the sky with his king. He landed in a quiet grove on another hillside across the island. When the demon revived, he sat up in the chariot and looked around him. He gave a hiss of anger when he saw they had flown the battle. He screamed at the Sarthi, "What have you done? Does a warrior ever run from war? Because you are terrified by Ram's arrows, the world will say I am a coward. Fool, fly back to the fight." But his head still spun with weakness. Gently his Sarthi said, "I am no fool, my lord, nor am I afraid. For centuries I have served you faithfully. Today, for the first time, I saw you were tired and in mortal danger. It is a Sarthi's sacred dharam to protect his warrior's life." Omens of death were all around us, and Ram's arrows flew at us like time. You were hardly yourself after he cut down your Trishul. You were full of age, and then you swooned. I had to fly you out of danger. What else could I do? That loyal Rakshas spoke calmly, and at once Ravan softened. He said, "You move me with your love, but I have recovered now. Brave friend, fly back into battle. I must drink Ram's blood today." The Rakshas turned to lash his horses again. Ravan stopped him, laying a hand on his shoulder. When the Sarthi turned around, he saw his king had taken a bracelet studded with diamonds and pearls from his wrist and was offering it to him in gratitude. Bowing to his great master, tears in his eyes, the charioteer accepted the gift and turned his chariot back to the battle. Auguste watched the reluctant duel from the Akash between heaven and earth. He saw Ravan faint and his Sarthi make the Rath invisible and leave the field. It was then that Rishi came to Ram in Indra's chariot. He came in a Suksham roop, a spirit from like bright vapor. Auguste said, "Ram, worship your ancestor the sun. The Aditya Hridaya is one of the oldest of all mantras. Worship Surya Dev with it, whom the Devas and the Asurs both revere, and you will kill Ravan today." Agastya taught Ram the pristine mantra and then vanished. Ram flew down to the earth. He asked for holy water. Thrice he dipped his fingers in that water, and thrice, as Agastya taught him, he chanted the Aditya Hridaya, the heart of the sun. It seemed the star blazed more brilliantly in the sky. Deep peace came over Ram, a living tide enfolding him. He felt his Lucific ancestor had heard him and touched him with a powerful blessing. Then Ravan came flying back into battle. For a moment, Ram thought he saw Surya Dev appear before him and whisper, "Hurry." Ram flew up in Indra's chariot to face the emperor of evil. At the twilight hour, Ravan's black horses frothed as he stormed back into battle. Ram said to Matali, "Look, he comes the inauspicious way of Apradakshina. He ignores all the omens and gives into his deepest desire to die." See, pradakshina is when we go clockwise. That means when we go clockwise, we are keeping our deity on the right side, giving respect. Apradakshina is going the counterclockwise. So he's saying he's doing the wrong way. Matali urged his horses forward. He came from the right, the way of Pradakshina. The dust from Ram's wheels covered Ravan's chariot. Flying up, the Rakshas shot a cloud of arrows at Ram. Now Ram put down his own weapon and picked up Indra's golden bow. The sky was full of devas and Gandharvas, Kinnars and Maharishis, gathered in the ethereal zone, breathlessly to watch Ravan die. More omens appeared in the sky. They all favored Ram. The way the wind blew was for him. Ravan's chariot was covered in a red sheen, as if it was painted in blood. Kites and vultures wheeled around it, as though it already flew with the dead. The Rakshasas of Lanka saw these omens and were terrified. Ram sensed victory. Spellbound, the Rakshasas and Vanars stood motionless, like figures in a mural of a frozen time. None of them fought anymore. Their battle would be decided by the duel that raged between the two flitting chariots. But as if fate had petrified his gifts, Ravan's prowess had deserted him. Cursing the unaccountable stupor, he aimed repeatedly at Ram's horses and his Sarthi, but his shafts were wayward and great weakness was upon him. It seemed that at last all the debts of karma he owed had overtaken Ravan at once. His hands trembled and his body, Ram had drained his will. Even the effort of drawing back his bowstring was almost more than the Rakshas could manage. He felt his vast age intensely. The deaths of all his brothers and sons had breached his soul. He gritted his teeth and wrote to embolden himself. Though he knew his time had come, he was determined to die a heroic death. All his 10 heads plain, chattering and screeching around the central one, Ravan fought on. They battled in the sky and on the ground, and at times the chariots flew out some leagues over the sea. Air, earth, water, fire, and ether were hushed when Ram and Ravan duelled. Primordial forces of light and darkness, Dharam and Adharam, battled through the two warriors. Yet again, in endless time, the wind did not blow anymore. The sun was dim as if he too held his fiery breath. The Devas grew anxious that despite all the portents, the duel was lasting so long. They began to wonder if Ram could kill Ravan, actually finish him. For hadn't all of them tasted defeat from the demon? Always serene and aware of the deeper purposes of fate, the rishis of Devlok began to chant timeless mantras to bless creation. May darkness and evil be overcome, and men live without fear in the world. May danger leave the earth today. May Ram kill Ravan. A Gandharva whispered to the enchanting Apsara beside him. The sea is just its own metaphor, and the sky also, and this duel between a man and a monster can only be compared to itself. One of Ram's arrows whistled perilously near Ravan's head. In a flash, the cluster of 9 faces vanished. Just then, another golden shaft from the Avatar's bow struck Ravan's central head from its neck. The demon's scream rang through the sky, but he did not fall. As Ram watched in shock, another devilish head sprouted from the Rakshasa's gaping throat, like a hideous flower from its stem. This grotesque green face grimaced, three-eyed at Ram. A forked serpent's tongue flickered across its lips. Its eyes were lidless, yellow, and utterly malignant. Ravan raised his bow again. Now he fought with fresh vigor, as if the beheading had renewed him. Ram loosed another silver shaft at his enemy and took the second head off in a scarlet burst. Ravan's roar echoed down among the monkeys and demons. The sea rose in crested waves. The Rakshas staggered in his chariot, almost falling. But then once more, like a weird plant thrusting forth its horrible fruit, another grisly head pushed its way out of Ravan's neck. Now it was a less demonic visage that roared at Ram in the sky. It was a head more like the first one. So these were not the heads of the sinister cone. It was not to be that Ram would sever 10 heads and victory would be his. For the first time, doubt gripped the prince. With each fresh head that sprouted on the Rakshasa's neck, he seemed rejuvenated. After the second head was struck off, he fought as if he had just come into battle. The shafts from his bow were a virile stream between the chariots. Ravan's face, his hands, and his skin were unwrinkled and young again. Still wrapped in a pall of dread, the sun began to sink into the western sea. Twilight fell. Now the chariots were luminous, their horses glowed, and the warriors were illumined by the light of their arrows. Once more Ram struck off Ravan's head. Again the Rakshas sprouted a fiendish one in its place and fought on, chortling in mirth. Matali turned to Ram and cried, "This is Ravan you are fighting, and it is the new moon tonight. As night grows, his strength will be 10 times what it is now. If you do not kill him quickly, Ram, you yourself will die." Ram looked at Matali with a silent question in his eyes. The Sarthi said, "Only the Brahmastra." Ram saw Agastya's austere face before his eyes again, and the rishi seemed to smile, endorsing what Matali said. Ram invoked the astra that Brahma had once created for the king of the Devas. He murmured its hermetic mantra, and that ultimate weapon which could extinguish a world appeared before him brilliant as an aurora in the twilight. Vayu was its wings. Agni its head, Akash was its shaft, and it was as heavy as golden Meru. With a prayer, Ram stretched out his hands to receive the astra. At once it lay as a golden arrow in his palms. He set it to his bowstring, and the sky shook as if its end had come. All the elements feared that astra. But Ram did not pause now. The shaft was as heavy as time in his hands. He clenched his teeth, and though his heart pounded out of his control, he drew his bowstring to his ear in a fluid blur. With Sita's face before his eyes, Ram shot the Brahmastra at Rama. A crack of thunder rent the air, and for a moment wrenched the earth out of her orbit. Briefly, it was day again, as if the sun had leaped back into the sky after setting in the sea. But the other sun, the legendary Ayudh, blazed into Ravan's chest with the demon's terrible scream. As it struck him, night fell on the world. The Brahmastra tore open Ravan's armor with fire. It ripped through his chest in an eruption of blood. Then it blew his heart to shreds. It bored on through him, flashed down into the earth, and pierced down deep into her. It flamed on down through rock and lava to the core of the world, and the earth's molten heart could not contain that weapon. It rose again through all the layers of the earth and flew back into the sky, and Ram's quiver, there it grew still. The two charioteers brought their chariots down to the ground. In one, Ram stood triumphant, and in the other, Ravan lay dying. Blood gushed from the wound in his chest, but his body still shone like a piece of star. Not once did Ravan cry out as life ebbed from him through the gaping wound. But as he died, his eyes gazed with strange longing at the blue one, standing so calm in Indra's chariot, Ram so merciful in victory. Vishru's son, Pulastia's grandson, the great grandson of Brahma himself, he who had been sovereign of the three worlds for longer than the Devas care to remember, great Ravana lay dying from Ram's arrow and from fate. As his burning eyes misted over, the Rakshasas and Vanars who had gathered around him in a hush saw his lips move. Repeatedly they tried to form a single word, a name, the name of her who had become his death. Her perfect face filled the Rakshas's last moment. Then his lips did not move anymore. His torn chest did not heave. Life had left Ravan. Even in death, his body glowed for hours like a dark flame on Lanka. So let's stop it here. And any question, comment, something you want to add to the details?
I have a question.
Sure.
हर्ष जी बचपन से पढ़ते आए हैं, घर का भेदी लंका ढाई विभीषण ने बताया था कि he has something amar in his nabhi and you should aim at the nabhi, then Ravan will die. In Valmiki's Ramayana it's not mentioned.
No. That is in the Tulsidas' Ramayan, but not in Valmiki's Ramayan.
Another thing we remember is that when Ravan was dying, Ram told Lakshman to go and learn something from him, and we don't see that. Ravan is already dead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know where it was or where it is written. Maybe in Tulsidas.
जो रामायण पिक्चराइज करी थी उसमें दिखाया था
कि
को भेजते हैं, पर वो तुलसीदास की रामायण में भी नहीं है.
Yeah. See, there are so many versions of it. People, maybe the great people's, their imaginations also.
Yeah.
So, but in Valmiki's Ramayana, we don't see because he dies right
away.
Because that Brahmastra was so strong, it just killed him right away. Yes.
Yeah, that story had its own meaning, I guess, but it is not from here anyway.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
तो हर्ष जी दो मुहावरे गलत हो गए. एक तो ये वाला घर का भेदी लंका डाय.
Yeah, no, but उसमें क्या है कि Vibhishan did help at the time of Indrajit when he was doing that yajna over there.
Okay.
Okay, you remember that if Vibhishan is the one who told, otherwise that Indrajit, if he would have finished that yajna, he would have been invincible. That's what we read last week. Okay, and otherwise also, Vibhishan is the one who really gave the details of what Ravan has. Okay, and his the whole Sena also and the kind of weapons he has, the details Vibhishan gave. Okay, so yeah. The only thing is, yeah, in the other Ramayana, that Nabhi wali baat, yeah, that I did not read it in details in this Valmiki's Ramayana.
इसमें तो mention ही नहीं है.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sure, the war went on between those two, the duel for a long time, but ultimately he was killed with that Brahmastra.
So in a way, though it's the power of their missiles, as they call it today, the drones and the missiles and all these powerful weapons that we have today, they had a lot of weapons of their own kind, those astras.
Yes.
And Vibhishan, you can't call him a traitor because he threw him out of Lanka. So he came and joined Ram.
Yeah, but he was thrown out.
But Ravan did not try to realize that by kicking him out of Lanka, he's carrying all his secrets with him. And that could be harmful. And that's exactly what happened. And number two, Brahmastra, the gods favored Ram at that time and gave him the chariot and the Brahmastras and all that stuff. So it was also shows that it was the grace of God that eventually helped Ram win. Otherwise, this war was very equally dueling. Like
Ravan. I mean, even the Devtas could not conquer him. I mean, he even captured Indra one time, and Indra used to be standing there in Ravan's palace. So yeah, it was a pretty fierce. That's why God had to come. God had to incarnate to get rid of him.
Even over here, it is mentioned what we read today that he had defeated all the Devtas.
Yeah, all the Devtas. And if you look at it, the favor in Mahabharat war also, doesn't it look like that Krishna is favoring the Pandavas?
Yeah.
They were on the side of the Dharam. Over here also, it's a war between a Dharam and a Dharam. It's not that Ram wanted to kill him. He didn't want even a war. He just went there to do his duty to get Sita back.
So Hershey, in one way, it was just a matter of who had better weapons.
Weapons also, better weapons also, and who is...
And how to use them.
Yeah, weapons, definitely. Weapons do make a difference, but at the same time, the godly blessings will be on the side of the righteous person. Dharam.
Of course.
Yeah.
Harji, question is, so Ram in his own time, then Krishna in his own time, and every time there is always this big war going between good and bad, let's say, or evil, whatever. But it keeps sprouting back with so many faces again and again and again. So it's the other side of the same coin, I guess. So you really can get rid of it, even if you try, even if the gods come down and try it doesn't work. It is always, the coin is there. If the good is there, it's gonna always have the other side, and that's the other side.
Yeah, it will be there. See, this manifestation cannot exist without the tamasic.
Without the other side. Yeah, without the opposite.
It's a combination of a tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic. So it will always be there. The choice is ours. Predominantly, what we want to have in us at individual level, right? In the macrocosmic way, just like Poonam said, it will always be there. There's always a day and there's a night. Oh, that's a manifestation. The pairs will be there, right? And sometimes we just have an inkling to even taste the
other side,
night also.
Yeah.
So that we can know the beauty of day. So
but that's the name of the game, because that's what we're here for, right? To overcome.
That is the experience we want to have.
Yes.
Okay. Otherwise, if we don't want to experience any of it, then no desires, then we can go back into that unmanifested Brahm.
Mm-hmm.
But we have that desire in us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes we want that a little
challenge and to overcome
challenge also. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, whole life is all about overcoming
Shaitani in
this,
us,
right?
Shaitani. Don't we see that in our own homes also? Everything is fine, but कुछ ना कुछ कह दो तो देखो कैसे आग लगती है. It's a tamasha, right?
Maybe the fun side is that side. How do we? That's where all the fun is.
Yeah. But
No,
now
we don't want to go there.
हर्षी एक बार
wanna
फिर
go.
से हर्षी नमस्ते एक बार फिर से वो सेंटेंस बोलिए जरा. Just in case we forget.
nerves सामने ये होता है ना. I mean, it's just like आराम से बैठे हैं. You'll say something. And अक्सर this female energy is the one which is really थोड़ी
भड़क के
चुलबुले हैं. Yes. चुप करके क्यों बैठे हो? कुछ बोलो ना. So anyway, so we all are familiar with it. Yes, I'll read the Hindi one also. But next week we'll see how these wives come. क्योंकि हम पिछली बार कह रहे थे ना, मंदोदरी, how come she did not say anything? We'll see that how come she did not say anything so far. She'll come.
When Ravan died, did he say Ram?
No, he did not say Ram. इसमें लिखा है कि he had that chavi of Ram in the eyes.
Okay.
And then on the lips, he had Sita's name.
Yeah, but he couldn't say it.
He couldn't say.
निकल नहीं पाए, वो शक्ति खत्म हो गई. I like
even dying, he had Sita on his mind.
मेरे को बच्चों की तरह जैसे वो देखते हैं ना अपने programs, and then there's a fight and they get so excited. I got so excited listening to this.
Yeah, I know the details are so mesmerizing, and you will see that. I mean, it's more and more. It's like a amazingly detailed, even though this is a summary of the Valmiki's Ramayan. So it's just.
But I mean, if you see the DVD, that also, absorbs you.
Yes, it does. It does, because we are born with this story. This is so much part of our life, right? Whether whatever Mantra did, or Kakeyi did, or Sita did, or Ram did, or Dashrath did, all of these characters have a big impact in our own psyche.
Right.
Right? बचपन में सबसे पहले यही कहानी सुनी थी ना, रामायण.
Are these weapons still available in the sense? Are they there for people who are in the war zones?
I don't think so.
No.
Because most of these weapons, what they talk about, they were charged with the mantras. Even though the arrow looked the same, but the effect of that arrow was charged with Agni mantra. तभी तो कहा ना कि अदित्य हृदय मंत्र. So वैसा मंत्र बोल कर चलाओ. The same arrow will have a different effect. So it is like the person who is the warrior and the kind of a mind that person has. See, Ravan's arrows did not have that kind of a power at the end because he became weak. Okay, so it's not the physical like the hardware. It was a software.
It's the power of the mantra.
Power of the mind.
Yeah.
Power of the mind, actually, not even a mantra. Mantras are the words, but the power of the mind.
How connected?
One person can say Om and connect with God. The other person can say Om just from the mouth.
Yeah. So how connected you are.
Okay. So it's the power is in the mind. Okay. So we'll see.
Hersh, this is Raj.
Yes,
I have
Raj.
a question.
Sure.
There's a line which says Lakshman was at his side and they were like Mahavishnu with his
which
brother
page number?
Indra beside him.
Which
Page
page number?
472,
72.
top first paragraph, last 2 lines.
Yeah, Lakshman, yeah. So
Lakshman was at his
Lakshman was
side.
at his side, and they were like Mahavishnu and his brother Indra beside him.
So does Lakshman have anything to do with Indra?
No. His brother, Ram's brother. So that's what it means. It's a Ram's brother was like a Indra. So just Mahavishnu and Indra Devata. The same way Ram and Lakshman. So that doesn't mean Mahavishnu is Indra's brother.
Oh,
It is just another power. Mahavishnu and Indra, both great powers, are standing over there to fight against Ravan.
and was Lakshman avatar of somebody?
Lakshman was a avatar of Sheshnag ji.
Sheshnag.
Yes.
So same as Patanjali.
Yeah, Patanjali also, and same as Balram also.
Right.
Okay.
Whenever God comes as a Puran avatar, these devatas are always there to serve him. Because what did Lakshman do? Served Ram.
Yes.
What did Bharat do? Shatrughan do? They all served Ram. Ram is a Mahavishnu, and the rest are the powers. They come back on earth. Okay? So इसीलिए तो कहते हैं कि as a Ram, when Ram came and younger brother was Lakshman. जब कृष्ण अवतार होना था, तब उन्होंने कहा कि मैं इस बार छोटा भाई नहीं बन के जाऊंगा. मैं छोटा भाई था, मेरा कहना नहीं माना. This time I want to be an older brother. So Balram was older than Krishna.
Yeah.
So look at that. To me, I think it just gives a beautiful image of these avatars also. And that's
was Bharat.
so stories, we talk about it. And then हमारा जो प्यार है ना भगवान के लिए और उमड़ता है through the stories. हमें ये याद करके अच्छा लगता है. And then as Sheshnag, then Patanjali ji आए, उन्होंने हमें योग दे दिया in a systematic way. Even though yoga was there, but in a systematic way, he gave it to us. Just look at the blessings of these godly powers on us.
And Hershey, was Bharat also somebody's avatar?
Yeah, Bharat was, I don't remember if anybody else remembers, but he was the avatar also of some devta. Yes. Yes. I'll find it out for you, Raj.
Thanks.
भरत जो थे वो राम का जो 4 वेपन नहीं थे उनमें से एक थे.
राम क्या थे?
कमल और भगवान राम विष्णु के अवतार में जो भगवान के हाथ में एक में कमल है, एक में उनके जो अस्त्र शस्त्र है ना, उनमें से भरत जी थे एक.
Okay, I'll find out exactly, Raj.
Because I read it someplace.
Okay, all right.
And then जब राम जाते हैं तो सब उनमें अंदर चले जाते, समा जाते हैं सब.
हाँ. Okay, let me look at the.
Harji, I think Bharat and Shatrughan are considered as part incarnations of Lakshman was Sheshnag, Bharat was Shankh, and Sudarshan Chakra was Shatrughan.
Okay, so that's what Rani was saying, that उनके जो आयुध है ना. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good. See, it's a personification even in these weapons also. तभी तो कहते हैं इवन जो सुदर्शन चक्र है कृष्ण टाइम में सुदर्शन चक्र को भी अपमान हो गया. Otherwise you would say that how can a weapon have an abhiman? But there's a personifications of all this. It's a great philosophy which we are trying to understand with this limited mind of ours. जैसे गंगा के बारे में तो कहते हैं ना कैसे गंगा बाहर आ सकती है. And she gave birth to those 8 kids. Personification again. Okay. So let's look at this Hindi titles also. Sugriv द्वारा राक्षस सेना का
Hershey, What do you mean by personification here? Do you mean like it's a symbol analogy, or what do you mean by personification?
Yeah, it's like a हमें तो लगता है ना कि there's no life in there, but there's a life in everything. जैसे हम कहते हैं कि सूरज देवता, ordinarily the material mind will think that Suraj is just a big sun, big star up there.
Yeah.
Right? Physically. Yeah. But then हम जब पूजा करते हैं क्या कहते हैं? सूरज देवता है वो. That's a personification. Seeing God in everything, because there is a God in everything. जब हम people की भी पूजा करते हैं, it's not just a tree we are worshipping, it's the life in the tree. वो भी देवता है. Anybody who gives is a devata. And that's a personification. Okay? So सुग्रीव द्वारा राक्षस सेना का संहार और विरूपाक्ष का वध. सुग्रीव के साथ महोदर का घोर युद्ध तथा वध. अंगद के द्वारा महापार्श्व का वध. So this is what we read today. श्री राम और रावण का युद्ध. राम और रावण का युद्ध, रावण की शक्ति से लक्ष्मण का मूर्छित होना तथा रावण का युद्ध से भागना. See, लक्ष्मण पहले भी 2 बार मूर्छित हुए थे. इवन राम भी मूर्छित हुए थे. ओके, अक्सर when we see एक ही बार सिर्फ मूर्छा हुई थी कि संजीवनी बूटी आई, पर नहीं, इसमें कितना डिटेल से पता लगता है. श्री राम का विलाप तथा हनुमान जी की लाई हुई औषधि के सुषेण द्वारा किए गए प्रयोग से लक्ष्मण का सचेत हो उठना. इंद्र के भेजे हुए रथ पर बैठकर श्री राम का रावण के साथ युद्ध करना. श्री राम का रावण को फटकारना और उनके द्वारा घायल किए हुए रावण को सारथी का रणभूमि से बाहर ले जाना. रावण का सारथी को फटकारना और सारथी का अपने उत्तर से रावण को संतुष्ट करके उसके रथ को रणभूमि में पहुंचाना. अगस्त्य मुनि का श्री राम को विजय के लिए आदित्य हृदय के पाठ की सम्मति देना. रावण के रथ को देख श्री राम का मातली को सावधान करना. रावण की पराजय के सूचक उत्पातों तथा राम की विजय सूचित करने वाले शुभ शकुनों का वर्णन. श्री राम और रावण का घोर युद्ध. श्री राम के द्वारा रावण का वध. We'll stop it here because this is up to this point we read in detail in the English book. So now is Kamla there or